Hello? Yes, hi. Hello and welcome back. I hope you all enjoyed your lunch break. If I could just trouble you, if you could just please move forward a little bit to fill up the seats at the front, that would be best so you can have the best experience possible. And just to let you know, the topics relating to entrepreneurship will be focused in this hall, Hall A, and Hall B will focus on investment. Now we will start with another interview between Mr. Omar Christidis, CEO of ArabNet, and Mr. Andrew Hanna, the Chief Commercial Officer of VIVA. Help me welcome them to the stage.
Hello, everyone. How was lunch? Good. I see a lot of full faces. We're gonna keep you awake and engaged in this session today, and we're kicking off with a high-level interview with Andrew Hanna, the Chief Commercial Officer of VIVA. And what's exciting about this for me is we've been in this space for about 8 years now, and we've seen the reaction of telecoms in the digital sector change from one of kind of combative, shall I say, initially, to more open and engaged and interested. And so we're going to learn a little bit more about this from Andrew and about Viva's take on what's going on in digital. But Andrew, maybe we start off with this industry in transformation. Can you tell us about this? What's going on with the telecom industry and the revenues of the industry?
Sure. It's the worst session possible after lunch, but bear with me. I'll try to make it quick. We're going through a huge change at the moment. I think the whole industry across not just the region, but globally as a telecoms industry is going through a fundamental change. You look around at what's going on. Most of us are walking around with 2 or 3 mobiles, which means the penetration is quite high. In a lot of cases above 200%. Which means most of us are carrying 2 or 3 mobiles. And that, for us, also means the limited opportunities for growth. We have a lot of convergence between technologies taking place, between fixed and mobility. So mobility and mobile is going through a huge growth phase. Broadband is another area of focus that is changing the industry. We have technologies that are quite rapidly being deployed. We've moved very quickly from 3G to 4G and now 5G. And when you look at the cycle of technology, when we went from, say, 2 to 3, that maybe, say, took 5 years. We went from 3 to 4, that took 2 years. Now going from 4 to 5 will take even less time, which is a challenge for us. The other challenge for us is the cannibalization that we are seeing from the OTT, what we call the OTT, the over-the-top players. So I'll give you one example, which I know we've had a previous discussion on. To put it into perspective for you, a few years ago, most of us were very heavy users of SMS.
Maybe actually, I'll ask the audience this question. How many people have sent an actual SMS, not a WhatsApp message or something over the internet, actual SMS that your carrier charged you for, in the last week? Okay, that's not bad.
But
it was to stop the service. Oh no, I think that's the opposite of what we're looking for.
All right.
Okay, so still people are using, but maybe not as much as before.
But look, I mean, 2 years ago, I would say that 95% of the audience in the room would have put their hand up. And it's not just in the last week or the last day, it's probably in the last half an hour. The reality of the matter is something called WhatsApp happened. And we watched, and the reason I'm telling this story is it's the disruption that we are going through and the impact such a small software company of 17 people based out of Eastern Europe can extract a lot of value for themselves, but also can make a huge impact on an industry. So just to give you high-level figures, let's say 2 years ago, SMS was making up 8, 9, 10% of revenue for a telecom company. And obviously that has an impact on the valuation of that company. All of a sudden, WhatsApp comes on board, and the deployment and the uptake becomes quite high. And all of a sudden, you have that revenue stream dropping practically within, say, less than 12 months to zero. Now, WhatsApp is a company that's valued at, well, when Facebook bought it, it was valued at $19 billion US. I would say today, if they try to revalue it, it would be worth multiples of that. The amount of market value destruction, or the value that has been reduced for telecom company just as a result of that one application and the impact that it's had on messaging, on communications, on voice over IP, on cannibalization of the voice revenue, has been hundreds of billions of dollars of market capitalization. When you look at that and put it into perspective of 17 people starting up an application that has such an impact on an industry, you start looking at some of the disruption that we are going through. And I think most of the startups in this event or around the world are looking at disruption. And I think the favorite topic is, can we disrupt an industry? Can we disrupt an existing revenue stream? Can we do things differently? And I think this is, we're a technology company at the end of the day, and we caught into that, that wave. We cannot help it, and we have to be extremely conscious of the impact that such new disruptive technologies or disruptive companies could have on us, and the destruction in terms of value cannibalization or value destruction or movement of capital between a small company and a large company like ours becomes tremendously important and something that we need to keep an eye on. Last but not least, obviously the rapid deployment of technologies such as 5G. How do we use it? How do we remain relevant in the world where, for example, our next revenue stream, such as voice, is becoming obsolete, is becoming a revenue stream that people will not even think about. And you will see that most of us that are in markets where we're able to use voice over IP, that it's probably easier for us to be sending the message to someone and then press the talk button on WhatsApp, and all of a sudden that's a call that is a reasonably good quality call. That's revenue that is going towards data, but it's not compensating for what's happening on the voice side. So these are some of the challenges that we're going through at the moment, and we're an industry in transition.
So, and this is very clearly the burning platform, right? Historically, main sources of revenue, voice, data, SMS. We are seeing significant erosion across the board of a lot of these revenue streams. So what does this mean for the industry? First of all, today, is the industry really being commoditized? This is becoming utility. We've been talking about this. I've been talking about it personally for 7 years. I said, this is an industry that is being commoditized. And if not, then what are the new revenue streams that are going to be critical for telcos?
Without a doubt, we are at an inflection point as an industry. I think if we do not become relevant and we do not think differently, I think there is a huge risk for us becoming as we like to always say, a dumb pipe. Becoming irrelevant, becoming a commodity. And that makes it a huge difference for us. Do you want to continue expanding, differentiating, adding value, being relevant, or do you want to be a utility in the background where customers are not even paying attention to the value that a telecom company can bring? So we are at an inflection point over the next, I think, short to medium period. Certainly in the next, my humble view, probably in the next 3 to 5 years, we will end up being either very relevant with new technologies and figuring out a way around using data and finding new revenue streams, or we will go down the road of being irrelevant, or we will miss out and be commoditized to a certain extent. The challenge that keeps us awake on a regular basis is how do we find that new revenue stream? How do we monetize new revenue streams? How do we build or borrow or partner building the right infrastructure, with the right ecosystem? How do we build that to continue to become and to continue to be relevant for our customers? The issue of relevance is something that we are grappling with as an industry at the moment. We have a lot of good revenue opportunities that are coming up, whether it's new technologies such as 5G, broadband, fixed to mobile convergence. We have the IoT platform, for example, or the IoT, the idea of IoT as a huge growth area, whether it's from a business to business or a business to consumer perspective.
Could you give us maybe a concrete example about how a new revenue stream for a telco in the machine-to-machine or Internet of Things space?
Sure. Look, my view of that is the Internet of Things is a nice buzzword at the moment. But when you dig deeper into where is the relevance of the IoT platform, it's not necessarily in the fads such as tracking of healthcare. Although if you take the business application of that, where you take the B2B side of it, I think there's a huge immediate opportunity on business to business for IoT. Whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, whether it's tracking of machinery. So if you look at, I'll give you some examples of companies such as GE, for example. I know it's not in our industry, but if you look at what GE is doing at the moment in terms of utilizing the IoT as a platform, as a concept, building all the machines with built-in SIMs, built-in ability to be able to communicate to a central database where, for example, I don't need to go and visit a oil or gas site to change a pipe or to change or to do maintenance or to do regular maintenance. That element of communication, real-time communication using data and being able to couple that with big data analytics, a very strong analytics platform, it makes a huge difference for us as an opportunity in the IoT. People talk about vehicle tracking. They talk about, it's a nice vertical solution. The convergence that's happening between financial services and mobility, there's a huge element of IoT involved in that. Healthcare, whether it's from a person to a medical practitioner or medical provider, or actually in terms of the infrastructure and the ecosystem provided for hospitals, doctors, pharmacies, and so forth. I think that where you have real-time data, real-time decision-making, and the ability to automate all of that, or as much of it as you can, end-to-end, you end up with a great opportunity. Initially, I believe for the B2B, but then I think it will trickle down into the consumer element of the IoT.
So we are talking about essentially working with companies to smarten their machinery,
sure,
collect data from it, aggregate all this data, analyze it, and come back to them with actionable insights that are going to improve their business.
Precisely.
So, and you talked about a lot of different sectors here, with healthcare, logistics. Are there specific sectors or types of companies that you think are best fit to work with telcos, can take most advantage out of a telco?
The simplest answer is yes and no. So it sounds confusing. However, yes, because I think we need to be specific on the kind of companies that would work, because it's mobility. So now the reason I say it's a yes and no, because every element of disruption, every element of application, every company that is thinking of being as a startup has got a mobile element to it, if not built on that in the first place. So how do I utilize my infrastructure to be relevant? The reason I say no, there isn't a specific company, is because I think that's the risk, is that if we start thinking about a specific company, then we limit ourselves. And I think that's a huge risk for us, is how do we not limit ourselves with only one type of company? I think the DNA of a telecom company like us has to change. And I think it's rapidly changing to allow for us to partner with as many companies as possible, with as many startups, and to be part of that ecosystem. That's why we shouldn't concentrate on only one sector or one type of startup. Yes, we should, because they need to have the mobile DNA. And I think companies that are starting from a non-mobile DNA would struggle with us, but I think companies that have a mobile DNA from the bottom up will do very, very well, because then they can adapt to how we do things, how the journey and the customer experience and the touch points that we have as a telecom operator.
So I want to stick with this DNA question, the DNA concept. I want to talk about innovation in the DNA of telcos, right? Large organizations have had trouble across industries, not just telco, in making this digital transition. My first question is, how do you really instill innovation in the company? How do you try to foster innovation internally? And the second one is, how do you work with startups, given that, again, the DNA of a startup is this lean, agile, fast thing, and the DNA of a telco is this very super-structured, hierarchical, process-driven organization. So one, how do you integrate innovation in this large, structured organization? And two, how do you enable yourself to work with startups?
Sure. Okay. What I have seen, I've worked for some pretty large companies, obviously, including our group at the moment. What I've seen typically happens with companies is that, and most of us would have seen it in the corporate world, is that they go and they hire a chief innovation officer. Or they go and build a division that says, this is the innovation division, or this is the new ideas division.
Well, the NBK CEO this morning talked about building an independent innovation unit inside the bank.
Sure. So
you don't agree?
I don't, no.
Okay, good.
So the reason being is that you have the old trying to grapple with the new, and there's a lot of examples, believe it or not, of technology companies, and I don't want to go and mention some colleagues working for some other telecom companies around the region where that experiment has never worked. The reason being a very simple one is that unless you build it as part of your DNA, as part of everyone's job, what happens is that there is a team sitting over there, that's the innovation team. Whatever they will come up with, we will figure it out, and then that team has to go on a regular daily basis trying to convince everybody else, the person running operations and marketing and sales and day-to-day operations, that this is good for them. So it becomes a constant selling job, and it will not work. It has to be built from the DNA. It has to be built in from the right people that think differently and are willing to take some chances. I should not, as a CCO, wake up in the morning and go, okay, check with my innovation department what new ideas that they've got. I should have everyone within my team being able to think of how is disruption going to be affecting them? What is it that you need to do? How will I transform my retail operations? How do I build my digital operations? You cannot rely on someone. The problem with relying on somebody is that it becomes a phenomena called social loafing. Some of you that like psychology and behavioral economics would know what social loafing is. Social loafing is when everybody thinks someone else will do something and nobody ever does it because you're just waiting somebody else to do it, and then someone else will go and do it, and nothing ever gets done.
We have this in all of our offices. Yes, no?
So what ends up happening is exactly that, and I've seen a lot of companies, they go and create, chief innovations officer, but, and there are, by the way, and I don't want to go through that because then I know it will get sensitive, but there are companies in Kuwait that are very much digitally focused from the ground up, and you can see their speed, and you can see their customer focus, and the customer experience is completely different from companies that are trying to transition. Now, does that mean you give up? Absolutely not. But the process in an established company will take some longer time because you do need to build it in, and you do need to change the thinking a little bit. That leads me on to the next question, or the next part of the question, which is how do we do that? It's not easy. And yes, you're an established company and you get a startup, which is 4 or 5 people that have got a great idea. You need to go through a typical systems, processes, procedures. How do we do this? How do we do that? What's the P&L? What's the balance sheet? What's your return on investment? And the reality of the matter is we need to change. We need to become a lot more savvy. We need to realize that if we wait for perfection, we will be irrelevant very quickly. I think we need to also challenge the status quo to a great extent. And that happens from the top down. I think innovation has to happen from a way for us to go and say, okay, what is the worst thing that could happen? Why not try 20 partnerships? Why not try this small company? What is the worst thing that could happen? What is the risk? Especially if you've built up that ecosystem to a certain extent, and also to a large extent the gut feeling that says, I don't mind. What is the worst thing that could happen? We are, as telecom
you kind
companies...
of know what's the worst thing that could happen in the industry is eventually irrelevance. So this is, whatever it is, it's better than...
So, you know, I'll give you some examples of companies that unfortunately, and anyone here is carrying a BlackBerry?
Nokia?
Okay, no, but the same question around the SMS. How many people in this room 2 years ago or 3 years ago would have been carrying a BlackBerry? Half? A third? 4 years ago, 5 years ago? I think, yeah, so I think you get, I mean, the simplest thing is BlackBerry is a technology company that fell victim of exactly that. Do I continue bleeding my biggest cash cow revenue stream, which is the BlackBerry device, the service revenues, and in some cases, I remember 5, 6 years ago, we had a waiting list for a BlackBerry probably for 6 months. Come 2011, with the iPhone 3 and 4 obviously being launched in the region, it was no longer a case. It's very easy as a technology company to lose your way. And I think adapting, and the same thing that happened with Nokia, trying to come out of that, it's very easy to lose your way. It's very easy to become irrelevant very quickly because technology is moving incredibly quickly and incredibly fast for us. So that becomes a challenge. We need to start thinking differently. We need to embrace the idea of startups. And that's one of the reasons why, you know, to be very honest, we're happy to support and be here and get exposed to what's happening in Kuwait, and to look at how can we use a lot more of these kind of ecosystems and forums to say, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen? Let's build up a partnership model, let's build up an ecosystem that allows us to skip a lot of the traditional thinking around systems and processes and procedures, and try new different things. And it's the startup mentality. Let's try, and if it doesn't work, we will pivot and we will do something differently. And, you know, it will stick, may not stick, we may have to pivot again. We need to change our thinking.
It's interesting, I think, again, the similar theme to the WhatsApp question, which is, if you're not willing to cannibalize your own revenues when you see a clear technology trend, then you're just waiting for someone else to eat your lunch for you.
Pretty much.
So I think that about wraps it up. Thank you so much, Andrew, for joining us. Thank you for sharing your insights. We hope to see the technology industry and telecoms and VIVA thrive in the future and find its new revenue streams. And we hope that some of those will be built on collaborations brought about through forums like this between you guys as the biggest players with the largest access to really a huge customer base, and some of the people here who have amazing innovations that are very monetizable and can drive future revenues for you.
Thank you.
So,
it's great to be here.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you.